But really the scope of this topic is around how nonprofits, and I think most of you here today are nonprofits, can create social enterprise, and that means business model revenue streams within your nonprofits to help you become more sustainable. And there's really two worlds. There's the traditional world of philanthropy where we're writing grants and we're going to approach high net worth individuals to solicit them for what I call social investment into your nonprofit. But then there's this new space, what we call social enterprise. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute and kind of some loose definitions of terms, because you'll hear sometimes throughout. So I think, Kirsten, you're navigating, right?
Yes.
All right. So some of these are just background slides in terms of getting to keep going. So this is a question for the group, and whether you want to chime in or you want to just write in the chat box, feel free. But what does your nonprofit organization business model look like? And I ask everyone that in terms of, if I'm talking even a workshop on fundraising, I ask, what is your fundraising model? Is it built around, and what does that pie chart look like? Is it built heavily around grants, institutional support, government grants, major gifts, minor gifts, or events? And so because that gives you a makeup of what we call the portfolio for your organization of revenue streams. Going toward a business enterprise concept, it starts to get you to think, what are products, goods, or services we can focus on that will help get us revenue streams that are unrestricted? So I'm going to pause. Kirsten, did you have a question or a thought?
No, just a comment from Lori saying she's engaged. She's in.
Awesome.
I was just smiling at that.
Awesome. And so you're going to see, and I'm going to talk about this. So I'm wearing a shirt that I think most of you can see that says visionary on it. I'm also armed with a bracelet. This is from Vita Nova. Vita Nova is a amazing organization here in Palm Beach County that works with homeless youth. And so this is one of their social enterprise concepts. This shirt that says visionary is one of my clients in Miami, the Motivational Ledge. They do amazing work with kids in and out of foster care. And this is one of their social enterprise endeavors where they're teaching the kids how to do the t-shirts, what drop shipping looks like, fulfillment, and really entrepreneurship academy, if you will. It's really what it boils down to, because ultimately we're trying to arm a lot of youth for success in career and life and future workforce. And sometimes they don't know what they want to do at that age. But we're going to talk about another one in Miami that's really amazing called Vibe 305. We'll talk about it coming up. And so that's an innovative program in terms of a special group of youth.
And I think, Christopher, just to talk about this point for a second here that you asked about the business model, I think what we know traditionally happens a lot is we have very young nonprofits. They know that there are grants out there. They start to get some grants. Simultaneously, they're trying to sow the seeds for individual contributions, but those may not reap rewards right away. It gets a little discouraging. So I think it's good to sit back and look at this every so often and say, okay, what is our model? And is it working? More importantly, is this model even working for me? Because if it isn't, it's time to figure something else out. And maybe this could be an option for you. I see Jennifer says she's still building out her model. They've moved quickly and now it's time to reset. And she has some ideas for social enterprise programs. That's great. And so when we get to that point, it would be awesome to hear about those, Jennifer.
So, Kirsten, when you were introducing my bio, it made me think about my master's program. And I was just a young man back then and getting my MBA. And I was reading all these business case scenarios. And I thought at that time I wanted to be a consultant. But I have a passion for the nonprofit social sector. And ultimately, it dawned on me that I want to apply everything I learned in business school to the nonprofit sector, because I feel and see so much it's missing. And I'm sure many of you have heard the term that nonprofits should be run like a business. So, and we're going to speak to that a little bit later on what that means. But I think that is exactly the case. What is a business model for your organization? And I've got a slide in here that actually this guy several years ago put together a business model all on one piece of paper, and it's something you could actually do with your board or your staff internally, and then allow you to see who are our key partners, what's our value proposition, what are the distribution channels, or in our case, programs that are moving the needle forward, and then how are we creating social investment to sustain those programs. And what is our, as Jim Collins would say from his Good to Great book, what is our hedgehog? What is the engine that's going to drive us forward to sustain our nonprofit business models?
And you know, that language about you should run it like a business, we get conflicting messages because we are also constantly told, yes, but you're not a business. So you can't really run it like a business. You can't pay top dollar for quality talent. You can't do these things. So we get conflicting messages. And I think part of what we're here to tell you is you are a business. You are a not-for-profit business, but you're a business. So we need to maximize all of the potential revenue streams, just like a business would.
And I think one caveat or distinction with that, you know, in the business world, it's about profit maximization. So profit is the gold standard for them. For us, revenue should be a friendly word to a nonprofit. You should be seeing revenue as a beautiful thing. It shouldn't be where you just are at zero balance every year of saying we took in so much, we spent so much. You should be thinking about endowments. You should be thinking about how to build cash reserves. You know, when COVID hit, you start to see the fragility and the vulnerability of the nonprofit sector. Plus, many of us in the health and human services were at the front lines of helping a lot of vulnerable populations. And so I think it should teach us and it should reinforce why cash reserves are critical.
Completely agree.
Why having business streams of revenue are critical. And starting small is fine. That is exactly, you don't have to create, we're going to talk a lot about food, I said earlier, the next Girl Scout cookie model tomorrow, because they've been doing that 100 years, since the mid-1920s, in fact. But it's certainly a place to start considering what is a product, good, or service idea that we can sell that will help give us revenue recurring in those downtimes.
Agreed.
So, this is just a slide I put in here about, this comes from a TED Talk that I love, but it's like, really, why was design thinking ever small? Why aren't we thinking big? Why aren't we thinking bold? Do we have fear-driven boards? Do we have fear-driven ideologies of saying, well, we've never tried it this way, or if we invest here, it's going to take some money this year away from programs? I'm here to tell you, this is a place to think bold. I'm a bold disruptor. I identify, that's why I proudly wear this shirt, as a visionary, and being a bold thinker and a bold disruptor, to say business as usual is forever dead. And it should be, because so many of our models were not sustainable. We were on wheels that were burning us out, especially in the social sector, one event after the other, burning out funders, sponsors, stakeholders, donors. And I think that's where innovation needs to come in. And this is a time more than ever to be innovative, to be bold. And we'll talk more about that with some examples. So here's where I pause a little bit and ask you a question. How many nonprofits there are in America, and how many nonprofits there are in Florida? Anybody want to take a guess?
How about nonprofits in America? Does anyone have a thought? A lot. Yep.
Yep. Sarah,
right.
You're right.
A lot.
Right, Sarah.
Anybody have 500,000, Lori?
Yep.
Okay, in America. Anybody else a guess? All right, Christopher.
All right, so we'll go to the next slide now. I'll show.
$1 million from Tanaka. Okay.
Okay, close, Tanaka. She may win the prize. So we have 1.5 million charities in America, 501c3 nonprofits. We have 109,000 in the state of Florida. And so from Martin County, the county north of us, and Palm Beach County, all the way to Miami-Dade, we have over 26,000 nonprofit organizations. That's a lot of missions. That's a lot. 1 in 10 Americans are involved with a nonprofit in some way. They either serve on a board, they donate, or they volunteer. So it's a huge part of the sector. And I think that's something we need to start thinking about. How do we leverage that power together? And so we'll go through the next couple of slides. This is old data, the 2.2 million. A few years ago, and I left that in there, the IRS went through and culled about 500,000 nonprofits who had standing or the paperwork, but they weren't active. So that's why it dropped down to 1.5 million. But at one point, it was 2.2 million 7 years ago.
Incredible.
Yeah, so again, today's topic is all about the business enterprise. And this is a question when I work with boards. I ask this question: how do you self-identify? You know, do you say we're this little nonprofit in Palm Beach County trying to make some change, or do you say we're trying to scale to 26 cities in the next 10 years across America as a social impact organization? And even the vernacular of how you describe your organization, how you self-identify, is going to change the mindset of those who support your organization, that believe in you, that understand the dream, the grand vision, we call it. And I think that is something that we want to talk about as we start to build our business enterprise concepts of where we're going. What does all this mean for the revenue that we're building? What does growth mean to scale, to move the needle forward on our social theories of change?
Christopher, Jennifer had a good question. When we think about those numbers of nonprofits, and you and I have had this conversation a lot, not everybody needs to start their own nonprofit. Often I'll send them down the block and say, go check in with so-and-so because your program, your nonprofit idea could be a program under someone else. But Jennifer's wondering, are there too many nonprofits and should we start considering mergers? Is there a way for two nonprofits to come together but still remain two separate entities?
So the first answer is probably yes, there's too many. Second is something I struggle with a lot about mergers, because I've been working with some clients who it would be in their interest to merge. I think it gets tough because of the decision points of who's going to lead, who will be in the leadership, what does that mean for the board makeup. So, but when and where it makes sense, if we're all trying to move the needle forward and we have similar shared mission spaces, then mergers should definitely be an option for consideration for organizations.
Agreed, 100%. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, and so this is why create a social enterprise, and it really is what I was speaking to earlier. We are so reliant on one or two major grants. If we lose those grants, generally we lose a program or have to lay staff off, and that's a risky proposition to be in, especially when tough times hit. 2008 was an example. Where we're at now is another major example.
Yeah, whatever we're in right now.
Exactly. The world we're in this whole year, 2020, yes. And I think that is, perfect time. And I think sometimes when you're in the valley, that is the perfect time to start thinking, how do we start to climb out of here, and what does innovation and big design thinking look like? I wanted to show you this chart just to let you know that in terms of the slice of the pie, in terms of trillions of dollars of our $20+ trillion economy, the nonprofit together is about 1.2 trillion. That's pretty significant. It's a third the size of the whole federal government. And so I think this is a good visual just to say who has the resources. And that is in blue, that's small, medium size, and large corporations. So as Kirsten mentioned, I used to be the managing director of the Office Depot Foundation. Office Depot was a global Fortune 200 company, and at one point 60,000 employees, and they just bought out Office Max a few years ago. So a lot of change, and we were the corporate philanthropic arm, and we were able to see what scale looked like at that point. We had 5,000 requests a month coming in from all over the world for our resources and for our little foundation. We were giving out between 15 and 20 million at one point, and over time, that fluctuated from year to year. We were able to make impact in only a few areas because even a big global corporation can't meet all the need out there, nor can we as nonprofits. That's why social enterprise and scale can only be reached generally as we grow the pie. And that's really what we want to think about. So what does this look like? So we'll go to the next slide. And so I put some links, and you're more than welcome to have access to all these slides today, but some of these are short videos on YouTube that just kind of go into what is the purpose of a social enterprise and what that vision looks like. We'll skip through, we're not going to be going to videos today, but it's just certainly some things that will help you.
Oh, thank you, Christopher. That's awesome. Love that.
It's hard to see that
These
link.
are examples of people that have created a social enterprise.
Yeah, it's some things off YouTube that speak to, and that one that you're showing now, it's a short segment. It was from several years ago, probably 2012 on CNN, about this carpenter who had a wood making company in North Georgia, and there were some homeless guys sleeping out in the woods. And he just said, guys, I can't give you much money, but I can put you to work helping me with my carpentry business. And they built amazing designs, these amazing wood products. And so it's changed these guys' lives in terms of it's given now they're no longer homeless, they're into apartments, and it's transformed. So that's a beautiful link to check out.
Okay.
So this is another free book, a free publication that you can look at. It's called Finding Your Funding Model. Now this is distinct from your business enterprise model. but this is from Bridgespan, and Bridgespan is one of the big management support organizations in the sector, and they identify about 10 key funding models. If you're usually under 3 years old, because some of you may be newer startups or less than 3 years old, you usually have what we call a funding mix. But once you start to get older in your life cycle as an organization, will eventually evolve to a funding model, and you'll probably fit somewhere in one of those 10 categories.
Okay. This looks like a great tool. Thank you. And I'm such a fan of Bridgespan. So thank you for that.
Yep. And so this is really like any business that you would start tomorrow, and or nonprofit. What's the vision? What's the mission? And of course, the strategy and action plan. And so at heart, I didn't tell you, and I don't know if it was in the bio, I used to run political campaigns years ago. I know we're in a political world right now. We'll stay out of politics. My point is, I am a strategist at heart. I love to look at whether it's a political campaign, a business, or a nonprofit, and I'm always thinking, what is their business strategy, and what is what we call now in the field strategic positioning? How are they positioning themselves for health in the future? And I think that is something to keep in mind, because there are a lot of businesses in the for-profit world that don't last.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just saw this week Lord and Taylor is closing all their stores. Sears was around 100 years. The original Amazon of Sears Roebuck, it's gone almost, or just almost to be soon to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
So industries get disrupted, patterns shift, and I think that's what we call adaptive capacity. And that is something you as a nonprofit need to always start to think, what is our, or the other term I use now is flex strategy, adaptive capacity or flex strategy. How are we bending, pivoting to this ever-changing world while keeping our eye on the horizon as to what's coming? What are patterns? What are things? Without getting too technical, there's actually a school of thought and a practice called predictive analytics. And that's what big data and big companies are using all the time. They're actually trying to figure out the future based on patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a whole other workshop. We'll talk about that one later. But
there's an element of that comes into play here. Yeah.
So here are the types of business models out there. The social enterprise is what we're discussing today. The nonprofit is an enterprise. You are a social enterprise by default, whether you recognize it or not. And I think that is something that from this workshop forward is going to be eye-opening in terms of how you self-identify. You have income. You have a product, and in this case, it's programming. You're selling to investors, institutional funders, governments, and others that are socially investing. They're not looking for profit, but they're looking for a social return on that investment.
Mm-hmm.
And there are hybrids. We're talking about the social hybrids coming up. There's LC3s. We don't have that in the state of Florida. That's in some other states. And basically that's for-profit structure similar to S-Corps, but they're doing things that are, it's limited profit, and some of the profit is for good. We have many of you probably heard of B Corps or benefits corporations. I think that's most in every state. We adopted that in 2014 here in Florida. LLC with social purpose, one of my favorites. That basically is if you want to start a t-shirt company tomorrow, but you want to sell one and give one to someone in need, that is the simplest form. That's an LLC with social purpose. Business with business with social responsibility. That's basically Office Depot, a major global Fortune company. It had a social cause it was trying to do, as well as, and even Coca-Cola's, Burger King's, any big company in America, they have a social narrative. And I've lectured about this, that it's either written for them or by them. And I think the proactive companies are seeing over the last 30 years, we better be in line with not just an economic transaction, selling our product or service with the public, but are we doing it responsibly? What does our supply chain look like? Who are we ordering from? Nike got into this trouble in the 1980s, employing underage workers in Asia and some tough conditions. They've since had to moderate and make sure that they are socially responsible now. And I think that's really where the world has shifted to what there's actually a group called Conscious Capitalism that is speaking to this. There's a book written by one of the co-founders of Whole Foods for other CEOs on conscious capitalism. And it's actually on my shelf here behind me. It's a great book, but I think that's at the corporate level. And then we'll be talking about nonprofits today. How are we also being socially responsible and socially engaging? So we'll go through a few more of these slides, and then I'm going to get into some hearing from you. But there's fee-for-service models. Some of you may have that already. Summer camps are fee-for-service models. You know, we're providing a summer camp for kids. They're paying us 25 bucks to attend. It's being subsidized by other funders and grantors. That is a fee-for-service. Earned income strategies. That's Girl Scout cookies, royalty fees. You may have something that you license out, a program that you license with another nonprofit, and you send them the notebook with all your content in it, and then they give you royalties for that or license it for it. You may sell t-shirts in partnership with a for-profit company and a joint venture for royalty fees. So all of these are ideas, business enterprise ideas, that allow you to build and grow the pie, as I call it.
Yep. Thank you, Christopher. I think if we all really think about what we do in our organization, we can come up with something in here. If you are a nonprofit that has come up with an amazing model to do something in one location, think about how you can package that in a box and license it and sell it. And I mean, there's so many opportunities. And that also then prevents you having to think about, well, do I need to expand to another city? Do I need to expand to, you know, another school district? Do I need to hire more people, have another another office somewhere? I mean, there really are so many opportunities if we get creative with this. I think what I love about what you're saying, Christopher, is you're giving us permission to dream a little bit and think about ways that we can be doing these things. And sometimes we don't give ourselves permission. We have traditional board thinking. And so it's up to us really to be creative and look at some of these opportunities. So I love it.
Well, and I think that's an excellent point, because I often challenge a lot of my clients. I say, you know, if you are spending if you do your homework and look at all the hours for an event, or if you do 5 events in a year, what is that return on time or return on effort for the amount of revenue you're getting, as opposed to putting all of that into a Girl Scout cookie model? And then imagine that pie just continuing to grow by selling products or services that generate revenue without burning your staff out, your donors out, sponsors out, with having an events model. And I think that's the danger. I love that every nonprofit has a signature event. I think it's dangerous if you build your whole model around 4 or 5 or 6 events or more a year. That's a tough one, because when '08 hit, a lot of banks couldn't sponsor anymore for corporate because they were taking federal dollars. So a lot of people got laid off that were friends of mine in the industry, and it was a huge blow to nonprofits who built their model on the 5Ks, the walks, all of those events, because a lot of their revenue was largely corporate and from financial institutions. So,
and we're seeing that now, right, Chris? I mean, we're seeing companies that are not willing to shift their corporate dollars to just an annual sponsorship of an organization when they used to sponsor your golf tournament or your gala or some other, you know, big event that you had. So it's something that we have to really move away from. And you run that risk of running into an event planning, you know, nonprofit, which is not what we're here to all be. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point, because I know many of you on this call and have or participated or heard many of the nonprofits have to shift to what we're doing right now: virtual events, virtual engagements with donors, sponsors, funders. You know, coffee time with the CEO is now virtually, when you're trying to solicit for that major gift. And so we're in a whole new era, which I kind of like some aspects of this. I'm not one who's saying, well, let's just quickly return, because I'm always about forward-looking opportunities. But I say, then how do we maximize this? And I think that's where the power of this platform that we're on, Zoom and other platforms, to record, to have video content, then that you can quickly upload because this is kind of, many of us don't have marketing budgets. You know, Coca-Cola, they have marketing budgets, millions of dollars, billions industry wide. Nonprofits, and one in particular that I love, you know, asked last year, their $2.5 million operating budget. And I said, how much did you spend on marketing for some of their enterprise concepts? And the CFO kind of laughed, and she said, $1,200. And she said, but we didn't have much success. And I'm like, well, I know, because you spent $1,200. So it's like, you're not going to have success unless you sometimes bet big on yourself. And that means you have to actually invest in yourself and your organization. And I think that's where the strategy comes in with the board and a group that will start to put proof of concept together, pilot, test things, and see, does this have gravitas? Then we can say, just like any for-profit business, let's put a pitch deck together. Let's see
Mhm.
angel investors, get the necessary capital. Let's just say we're all going to start a t-shirt company tomorrow. It's $10,000 cost to get that up and going, but you're going to make 70,000 that same year with it.
Mhm.
It's worth that 10,000. Can you find 10 people to give you $1,000? You've got it. You've got your capital. So I think starting to think like that, and then that 70,000 that you were spending time on, in terms of writing, grants or events or sponsorship packets that may have only given you 10 or 12 or 15,000, could be better spent on the enterprise side. And that's where the balance comes in. So I'm going to go through a couple of these. I'm not going to go through all, but some of these you've heard of. Tom Shoes, many of you have probably heard about that. This guy Blake started, not a guy named Tom, but Tom is short for tomorrow, and it's a whole philanthropy that he envisions. But you buy a pair of shoes is donated to a group of people in need. 5305 is an amazing gourmet food truck in Miami-Dade County, doing some amazing work with young people who, instead of sending them to jail, it's a deferment program for kids, for minors. Then judges will have discretion to kind of direct some of them and defer them into this program that will teach them business entrepreneurship skills. It'll teach them how to inventory products, how to sell to the public. And so it's been life-changing for some of the young people in that program. Greyston Bakery, if you have a few minutes, it's phenomenal. Go on YouTube, type in Greyston Bakery. It doesn't have an E, I misspelled. It's Greyston without an E. But you'll fall in love with Greyston Bakery. You'll probably start to order their famous brownies. And if you've ever had the chocolate fudge brownie chunk Ben & Jerry's ice cream, that comes from Greyston Bakery. Now, Greyston Bakery is unique because the people who bake the gourmet cakes that's been sold at the White House and these elite hotels in New York City, are ex-prisoners. They're all the prison reentry program.
Hmm.
And it's been around since the early 90s, and it's transformed their lives. They bring in about $7 or $8 million a year. I think after $2 million is cost, the rest goes to their foundation that supports their kids and childcare. So it's a whole ecosystem that they built all around food products. And it's amazing, that story at Greyston Bakery. So definitely YouTube that. All right, so there's a couple others that I'll just reference. El Sol is a small nonprofit in North Palm Beach County, and they sell box lunches for immigrant workers. And that's their fee-for-service model, and I'm sorry, their earned income model. So I think this gives you an idea. And Girl Scouts, I'll just talk about them for 1 second. So they are amazing. They sell these cookies that we all love and probably eat too many of, but it's phenomenal. They've been so successful. They've been sued 3 times by the cookie makers in federal courts, and they've lost because it's amazing. I mean, the cookie makers lost. The Girl Scouts won those cases. And what it is basically, because it's program-related income, they don't have to worry about UBIC, or what the IRS calls unrelated business income. If you're doing stuff and with product, good, or service that is tied to your programs, you don't have to pay taxes on it. But as one legal scholar here in Palm Beach County at Legal Aid, he's come to many of my workshops and spoken on the case law. He's like, boards of directors never have to fear selling products. He says, I don't care if you're selling t-shirts out of the trunk of your car. If it's not related to your mission, you're just doing it to make revenue, then just pay taxes on that part. That's that simple.
You're still making money. You're still ahead of the game.
That's it.
Yeah.
If it's tied to the program, if it's related to youth and entrepreneurship and learning, then it's just like the Girl Scout cookies, it's all tax-free. He said, I'll talk to any board at any time to let them know that you don't have to fear creating a social enterprise within your nonprofit, because it's totally legal, totally, we've got 100 years of case law supporting it.
I love it. Thank you. So Max, as I flip to the next slide, Max was saying, just confirming that this virtual business environment is great for expansion. Is that true? I would say yes.
Yes.
100%.
100%. 200%. Yes, Max, you're right. Because I think now there's no barriers. Sometimes you actually can reach more audiences through this virtual platform than you could knocking on 50 doors in a day. And I think that's the randomness. So I think now you can actually record yourself and email it to hundreds of people and send it to them.
That's
so
right.
you virtually reach so many more people than we ever could before. So I think just some questions to start thinking through as you start to decide and what your business concept can look like. You know what? Because I think most businesses in general in the world go bankrupt for not thinking through the marketplace enough. And this is what I've seen in all of my review of business cases. But if you think and listen, because sometimes it's really about listening in this world. What is the idea, product, good, or service that can help advance society? That's where the innovations come up, from the paperclip to a milk carton to everything that we have. When Steve Jobs said, I'm not going to give you a better flip phone, I'm going to put a computer in your hand, that changed the world. Now Apple is the first trillion-dollar company. And I think he filled a gap that we didn't even know we needed. We were all content with our BlackBerries for quite a while until we weren't. And I think that's when we realized, wow, there's always a better concept. So that's where you want to start thinking through, what does the marketplace need? What are products that can fulfill those gaps? What kind of capital do we need to make this work, to get started? Do we pilot it? Do we do beta tests? Do we do focus groups? That is where some strategy comes in internally. And that's where you say, okay, we're going to take 6 months or 12 months to actually test this. And that's what, if you ever watch Shark Tank, some of Kevin O'Leary and some of the others say, well, what's your proof of concept? And usually they test it by sales. For us, we can test it by sales and feedback. And so I think that there's value in this bracelet is by Vita Nova. It also turns into a USB drive. There's value in this bracelet because it markets them, but it's also a practical tool that if I need to save some data from my computer, it's there. And I think that's what you want to start to think through. What does branding look like? And I will just take a minute to define brand. Brand is the emotional connection that a consumer has with your product, good, or service. So when you think about brand like Nike, Burger King, Coca-Cola, you have immediately these emotions that come to mind with those products. And so there's a story. I don't know, I'll just give you the abbreviated version. It just came to mind. This is from a podcast I listened to. But they were talking about the Little Red Wagon. It was a 100-year-old company, and they started getting replaced by plastic red wagons when plastic came out, I think in the 70s. And so they had to go through this time of losing market share. And so they kind of figured out, well, if people aren't buying these little red wagons, let's try to figure out how we adapt or how flex strategy. And so they put together some focus groups, and they asked the people, what are your memories of the Little Red Wagon? And they said, well, I remember my sister pulling me in the wagon and the sunlight on my face. And so all of these different emotional stories, and they started recording it. And ultimately now that same company, Radio Flyer, is producing little red Lamborghinis, little red other objects that are now marketable, and keeps them in a marketplace. They've had to shift their strategy and their core product line, and that's fine. Because sometimes sustainability, your organization is going to be different 25 years from now than it is in the first 5.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And it's actually your job to adapt and transform. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories, Christopher. I heard that podcast too.
Yes, yes.
They make tricycles as well.
They do. They do. The little red tricycles.
Radio. Other things.
Yep. So I think we'll go to the next slide, but I'm going to wind down. These are just a couple of elements I wanted to share with you. Just a couple more slides about the business model itself. This is kind of, are we defined the marketplace? What does our research tell us? And I will say this quote that Henry Ford is famous for. He said, if I asked my customer what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. I was trying to give them the automobile that they didn't even know they needed. And it's kind of, so when you have something that innovative, sometimes focus groups aren't going to work for you. But so I think that's where you need to start thinking through the marketplace. What are we researching? What are we showing? The data and what the customer is wanting, and who is our customer. So the other ideas are around innovations in terms of also the fundraising opportunities around it, because the unique thing about nonprofits with social enterprises, and I will tell you this story, Jeffrey Skoll, the co-founder of eBay, he's a billionaire. He's got a foundation. He gives about half his money away every year. I mean, half of the corpus of his money away every year to traditional nonprofit work. But then the other half is to social entrepreneurs and social enterprise concepts. So there are funders out there that you can write for grants for that will help invest in your business idea. And one of them is the California Fund. They decided to invest in Tesla because they could have just given money to a lot of environmental nonprofit groups, or they could say, let's put money with Elon Musk and Tesla, who's really able to scale and change the world and reduce combustible engines for better climate. So they did that. So that's where the marketplace of giving is changing as well. Okay, so Jennifer just asked, what is the eBay Guys Foundation called? It's the SKOLL Foundation, Skull
Yes.
Foundation, Jeffrey Skull.
Yeah.
So this is before you is just a quick, very simple, it looks like it's convoluted and complicated. It is not. It's extraordinarily simple, but basically the essence of why your nonprofit enterprise exists is in the middle. That's what we call the value proposition. And I will tell you real quick, one organization I worked with, Mounts Botanical Garden, they're an amazing organization, North Palm Beach near the airport. They have a beautiful 50 acres of garden site. I worked with their board and I said, why do you exist? And they said, obviously the gardens. I said, maybe not. I pushed back on them after two board workshops and they said, maybe Christopher, you're right. Maybe the gardens are what we do. What do the gardens lead to? And basically they all had this aha moment. We're really in the inspiration business. We do it through the gardening, but as people come here and in our gardens, and they're beautiful gardens, then they get inspired. They get inspired to go back to the office and be creative. They inspire families, young people. So then they built a multi-million-dollar campaign around that proposition.
I love it.
So that's what we call the value proposition.
Now,
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, please go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, this business model canvas, are you thinking, okay, so if I come up with an idea for a business within my nonprofit, I would use this canvas for that particular business. I could use it as its own freestanding, let me look at the partners, the activities, the resources. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's just exactly it.
Okay.
It gives you guardrails for that business.
I love that.
Otherwise, sometimes you don't know where to start. You're just putting ideas on paper. This allows you to visualize what are the key resources needed? What are the activities of this business? And of course, this was designed for the for-profit community. I have another one that I've modified for nonprofits, but basically it's the same. Instead of channels would be like grantors and funders. Customer relationships would be to the audience you're selling to. So it's really just kind of thinking through how it works for us as nonprofits. Now, this book is an amazing book. I have it here behind me on my shelf. And we'll go to the next slide. But in it, it's a short little book, but it allows you to look at and think through how you're actually plotting revenue opportunities within your nonprofit already. And this is a simple model. I do this with board workshops when we're doing strategic planning. It's similar to a SWOT analysis, but really better because this really analyzes the business aspect of your programs. And it allows you to say which ones are profitable, whether summer camps. For example, you see the money tree is a profitable, but it's low impact or low mission. And that could be a golf tournament, for example. So it doesn't really do much for your mission, but it brings in a lot of money. So that's where you put that there. And in the book, they allow you to even do it in Excel with financial figures and numbers, and you actually plot it on a chart like this, and you can start to see what are actually profitable programs for us that are also high mission. Are there areas that we need to stop to get out of, and because it's taking away too much time and resources from the other products or programs? Are the programs that we love, they don't make us much money, but they are huge for awareness. They're great for the brand. They're great for the mission. That may be a gala every year that's just, everyone loves to attend. Or it may be other things that are an advocacy campaign. But then the superstars in the upper right corner, that's high mission and that's high income. And I think that's how you want to start to look at what are the superstar elements. And this is where the boards can actually back into, then this is where we need to spend our priorities and our resources for the next 6 months, 12 months. And this is what we call smart growth strategies and strategic thinking.
And by the way, there is the Social Enterprise Alliance, and there was a chapter starting up out of Lynn University a while back. I think they put it on hold with the pandemic, But Eve Lyon from Lord's Place was part of that gathering. I know Carrie Howe from our office went. And Lord's Place, of course, is another example of two very nice businesses operating under a nonprofit structure. You guys probably already know a lot about Lord's Place and have heard of them.
Totally.
So, thoughts, suggestions, ideas. Who has an idea for something that they want to run by Dr. No, or even something that they do, and maybe there's an idea that bubbles up as we talk about this. Does anyone have any thoughts? That was excellent, by the way. Thank you. Absolutely so informative. Who has a thought? Anyone? Don't be shy. We're not going to laugh at you. We're going to help you. That's what we're here for.
I have some really good notes. This is Jennifer. I have to jump off. I have a 2 o'clock, but I would love to further this conversation. But I have about 6 ideas written down for social enterprise. Obviously, not all at once.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be happy to connect you to Dr. No, or you've got his information probably from the slides. But he's always happy to have a chat as well.
Wonderful. Bye, guys.
Bye.
So Sarah has a question. Sarah Crane, at what point do we have to think about taxing income differently?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, and this is where I can have more offline conversations in depth, but if you can say that it is attached to the program and to your social theory of change, if we do these programs or interventions, these will be the outcomes. And part of those interventions are tied to income generating ideas, fee for service, earned income, or other, it is not taxable income. If it is not related in any way to the program or the mission space that your nonprofit occupies, then it is taxable income. And that's something that you really have to work with your accountant on. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of for-profit accountants, when it comes to nonprofits in general, there's different practices, and even how we report, balance sheets and statements of income, et cetera, are different. That the private sector, it's the P&L. And I think that is something that we want to start thinking through early on how we're going to structure this. Is it taxable income from product or not?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And actually, I just came across a 990 the other day. It was actually for a private foundation, which was interesting. And they had a whole separate schedule for the income that they were actually paying taxes on. So
Right.
it's important to be aware of, and it's important for your CPA to be aware of, but it's nothing to be scared of because it's just paperwork. It's just a different form, not a big deal. Eric, you have a question. Did you want to ask it instead of type it? We just need to unmute you, that's all. There you are.
My question to Dr. Noel, if your nonprofit has an opportunity to partner with a government entity of like type, what are the threats and opportunities that exist?
Yeah, great question. So I think I love those innovative partnerships. We don't do enough of them in this world, whether it's a joint venture with a for-profit, but if it's with a business entity, obviously with government entity, with government, generally there is what we call the red tape. So you'd have to figure out, are there constraints or limitations to marketing things cooperatively, and what that would look like. You really need to draw up that operating agreement with those terms, so it's managed expectations between both parties. And that's any kind of partnership, and really think through what their limitations are, because they're usually driven by taxpayer funded dollars. So they have constraints on what they can do and not do in terms of their partnerships. So you'd have to really think that through with them and or their attorneys to make sure you're doing things with good ethics, that the optics are good. I always call it the New York Times test, that you can be on the cover of the New York Times and you all could be justified in whatever decisions you've done. And I think that is really what you want to start looking out for in terms of partnerships with government entities, are those constraints.
Right.
Yep, agreed. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks.
Good to hear from you. Anyone else? Well, thank you so much, Dr. No. That was absolutely fantastic. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. One last thing. I know we've got to go, but
oh no, whoever can stay on, we can continue talking for a couple minutes. I also have some housekeeping items for everyone about interns, which is really important, unpaid interns that I have available for you. So go ahead, Dr. No.
Yeah, I was just going to just talk about Clean the World for 1 second, and that's the social hybrid model.
I love that.
That is one thing. Just if you've got just 2 more minutes, then I'll tell you this story. So this gentleman had an idea. He was trapped in a snowstorm in a hotel. He was high-paid salesman. He's like, what happens to the bar of soap when I use it one time in my hotel room? He called to the front desk, and he's like, what do you do with this bar of soap? And she's like, well, sir, we throw it away. And so that was his aha moment. Now he's got a $20 million social enterprise. He quit his job. Now he has a $20 million social enterprise at an Orlando that's become a national model for what we call a social hybrid. And now he's partnered with all those convention-ear hotels in Las Vegas, in Macau, China, because he can't even get to the demand of hotels across the country. But what they were throwing away for free, they're now paying his nonprofit 50 cents per bar of soap because they're doing it as part of a corporate social responsibility movement and what he calls a hygiene revolution. Those soap bars are being melted or repurposed, and then they're redistributed to many third world or developing nations around the world to kids who are dying with hygiene-related illnesses, who are now, he's saving their lives from this model. And he has a for-profit entity that they're going to start selling cleaning line on the grocery store shelves, and that's Clean the World Global. And the proceeds from those products will support the nonprofit. And that's what we call a social hybrid. And it's all controlled by the nonprofit board of directors through an operating agreement. And so that's a real innovation in our sector. And that's something that a lot of organizations are setting up, is both a for-profit and a nonprofit, and they're jointly married through that operating agreement, and it's controlled by the nonprofit board. So that to me is the future, or the social hybrids. That's where I work with a lot of clients on helping to start thinking in that fashion going forward.
I love that. So Glenn has a question. He says his background is mostly traditional NGO, doesn't know much about social enterprises. Do you have any recommendations for good and readily available introductory resources about social enterprise theory?
Yeah, so there are some books out there. I'm actually working on one myself, but because it is such a new field, and because whether you're a for-profit company that wants to change the world, or you are a nonprofit who wants to have new revenue streams, there are some resources out there, but some of those are not in text. There's a couple of books that I have, and I can send you a link, follow up with a couple of book titles that Kirsten could send out to you.
Yes, we can send that out with the email after this session, which we're going to start doing that, right? So after every session, Tanaka has taken note of who was present, and we'll make sure to email that, and we can send that information as well. Yeah. And
I would start with simply Googling the Greyston Bakery, because when you watch about 5 or 6 of their short videos, and all their videos are about 5 or 6 minutes or less, you're going to be blown away, and you're going to start to see it come to life so quickly. And I think that will help you tremendously.
Thank you so much, Dr. No. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Great job. So you all will get a copy of the slides, and that has Dr. No's information. So if anyone would like to book, a 15 or 20-minute appointment with him to run some ideas by him or pick his brain, I'm sure he'd be open to that. So please reach out to him, or certainly if you want to just send him a note and thank him for his work with us today. It was wonderful. Thanks, Dr. No. So good to have you with us. All right, so on to our next date is going to be Friday, September 11th, and it's going to be From the Ground Up, Growing Your Young Nonprofit. So we're going to talk about things like how to sow the seeds for individual contributions down the road, how you start working on grants when you can't even seem to get your foot in the door, all those things that are so important when you're starting out as a fairly young nonprofit. We're then going to talk on Friday, September 25th about your elevator pitch. So we'll be helping you to actually create your elevator pitch. And then we'll do a pitch tank on Friday, October 9th. And that's where we're going to ask you to share your pitch with us. And there's nothing to be afraid of. There's